All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to call the meeting back to order. Hopefully everybody's stomachs are full. We don't hear too many loud snores out there in the audience this afternoon when you fall asleep.
That finger with
As we move forward, again, the anticipation is for everybody's understanding, we are planning on attempting to adjourn early today. Try to get out of here 3 or 3:30 our time. That is all anticipated based upon the amount of questions that are asked and the amount of questions that have to be answered.
Before they close Togety Pass.
And before they close Togety Pass with the fire. Yeah, that's right. That'd be a long ride back home for you.
That'd be a big old circle, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So with that being said, the next two pieces of the information that you'll see on your agenda are a little bit duplicative. So that's where we think we can save a little bit of time. We're going to go through the annual plan is the next portion of this. And then that annual plan actually does have the budget built into it. So if you have questions as we're rolling through as it relates to the budget, I do not anticipate that we will take the budget as a secondary item as it's related on the agenda. We will roll right into that as we're going through. So if you have questions budgetarily related, please ask now or forever hold your peace until we decide what we're going to do as a committee and whether we move this through as a bill. So with that being said, we've got the department back up. Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys making the trip up as well. And Mr. Director, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Touche, Mr. Chairman. Okay, we'll start off with the executive summary, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay with you. That's tab 1. And what I want to talk about in the executive summary is kind of some of the directions that we're headed to, some of the things that we've done over the last year. And then also that's where the budget determination or recommendations from the commission are also housed. So I'd like to direct your attention to the condition schedule, capacity schedule, and then kind of where we're at on Mercer study. So that's about the middle of the page on page 1 of 101. There's 25, 26 supplemental budget conditions document towards the end of this. But this is consistent with how we've historically, we, the department and the commission, have moved forward with our budget requests. I think you're aware, although I know some members of the legislature, I get the question almost every year, how come you have such a big supplemental budget? Well, by statute, we're required to provide a supplemental recommendation on condition capacity, and in this case, with the addition of our 3-8 requirements for projects. So annually, we work with the commission and we're tasked with addressing the adequacy of the school buildings and the facilities, and then prioritize the needs assessment to them and to the committee. And so to do that, we've done periodic site investment and investigations on buildings. We also did and completed in 2023 the FCA, or the that would give us an facility condition score on each of the buildings, and we're utilizing that. And as at previous meetings, we've talked about how that will work in the future, where that really gives us a long range plan, 20-year plan in that study for buildings in the future. So again, in this budget request, we're looking at condition schedule. So that's a schedule to address the building condition needs, categorized both as educational and non-educational buildings based on established criteria and measures for the buildings. We also look at capacity. And that's a schedule to address building capacity needs determined through an analysis of school student enrollment changes over a 5-year projection. So we're looking ahead 5 years on the capacity. And something that was new to me coming back in November, we used to look at that primarily on a district-wide capacity assessment. Now we look at it on an individual building. That doesn't mean that if we do a Mercer study and we move forward looking at that we're not taking into account the district-wide availability of seats, so the district-wide capacity. But we are addressing those individual building capacity needs also. And then for those schedules, the commission has adopted then a most cost-effective remedy. There was a lot of discussion last year in the session that the department was perhaps a little bit out of sequence, where there was some funding requests and we were still working through the Mercers. We're working through those Mercers. I anticipate a little bit of discussion later on. We've got a number of those out. They're underway and we're moving forward. But I believe this year we'll be back in the sequence and utilizing those Mercer studies for future requests through the commission and through yourselves. Then the districts also have the availability to request funding for projects that would address building adequacy. That's Chapter 3, Section 8. We had 3 requests on school buildings and 2 on transportation facilities that have already moved through the commission and have affected budget requests, previous budget, as well as perhaps what we're looking at moving forward with some of these projects this year. So that is out there also. On the next page, page 2 of 102, again, the FSC in consultation with yourselves, the Select Committee on School Facilities, may recommend consolidating educational facilities or between school districts subject to legislative approval, making decisions regarding buildings and facility needs. And again, that kind of comes back into what we're looking at with the Mercers. We're making those assessments when we're doing those Mercer studies. The criteria for building capacity considerations include a comparison for, as I mentioned earlier, from the existing to the projected student populations, and an analysis on classroom numbers and square footage, an examination of the square footage per student, and then the assessment of loading and the utilization factors. So for example, at the elementary range, those students primarily stay in their classroom. They don't move from one site to another. So we use a utilization rate of the building or the square footage if it's 100% utilized. In a high school where they're moving from classroom and moving maybe down to the science and they're moving over here back and forth, we consider that building at an 85% utilization. And there's different utilization rates depending on the configurations of school. It could be a K-6 or a K-12 or a K-8, maybe if it's a K-9, those sort of things. There's different utilization rates that we take into consideration. Let's see. As I mentioned earlier, I won't go into the summary review for the year, but we talked earlier about the department contracting to do the FCA for the 48 school districts. That included about 600 school buildings in all. And that's currently what you're utilizing to move forward with condition. The school facilities division, so kind of looking forward, our short-term goals, we want to have a review on security in conjunction with the Safety and Security Summit. And as I mentioned yesterday or this morning earlier, that's in consideration also with WDE and the superintendent, as well as Homeland Security. And so they'll be helping support that summit that we're putting forward. We want to take a look at the advancement in technology in those areas. Again, the old assessment that was done was in 2015, and there are technological advances in school security also. Additionally, we'd like to hold that summit, and that's scheduled for the 12th, I believe, of September. and it'll be in Cheyenne. We've got kind of save the dates and those sort of things. We've got quite a few people already registered, but we're reaching out again to see if we can't get more folks coming to that. We've had some interest from consultant firms that also want to attend that are in that security area. And I think that would be good to kind of hear from them also as to maybe what's out there.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
just to interrupt for a second, Director, any chance that that particular meeting, are you planning to Zoom that? Is there any chance that we could do that?
I don't believe we are. And the reason is
Okay.
we have a number of breakout rooms
Okay.
for
gotcha.
that.
Okay.
But it will be a report that will certainly get back to this committee and the commission both with, kind of what comes out of that and maybe where we're headed.
Okay. Thank you.
And that, in my mind, is gonna certainly not probably this year, but next year in the budget, come back and take a look at how we want to fund security. And maybe, as we saw yesterday, there was a discussion on vestibules here in Teton County as well as elsewhere. Maybe that's a priority that we want to try and take on as a state and fund that with direct appropriations for making sure we have vestibules, for example, at all of our buildings. Another one that we have is we're planning to offer training regarding the implementation and best practices for routine and preventive maintenance. We've talked to a few consultants on how to probably roll that out. And currently on my desk, I need to review the RFP that we're going to go out with. My plan is to have an all-encompassing training. It's an 8-hour training in Casper. And anybody that receives state funding for their buildings, so it would be UW community colleges, the school buildings, state buildings, will be invited to this. I'm thinking maybe even reaching out cities and counties. And the first part of that's how do you put together a routine maintenance plan? What does a routine maintenance plan look like from kind of a national standard? What does that entail as far as training, resources, for the future? And from that, now that one we do plan to Zoom so that folks like me, if I'm taking notes, I'm not necessarily hearing the speakers, and so that they can come back, or if there's change in personnel in the future on the facility side, that they can be able to go back and look at that resource. And then from there, we're going to roll out 3 individual Zoom meetings. So they'll just be strictly, you can sit in your office. We won't have another gathering place like Casper. But based on the feedback that we get from the big meeting in Casper, is set up individualized training sessions. And in the RFP, we'll have 3 of those from an hour to 2 hours long for routine maintenance. And I think if those are successful and I have good feedback from the facilities community, that we'll probably try and do those in the future and keep that training kind of rolling forward. And I guess commentary on that right now, my belief is that we're in somewhat of a in our preventive maintenance, we're in a reactive mode. And what we've heard from consultants in the facilities community, when you're in a reactive mode, that means you're going to end up spending about 3 times more money than you would if you have a good plan and you're doing what you need to be doing, such as checking the balances on motors and checking your belts and your filters, rather than letting things break that cause more, and you're just always reacting rather than doing a true preventive maintenance plan. And so with that, I hope that will help us on the routine maintenance side. And then if we're in that preventive mode or that reactive mode, that increases your major maintenance costs. So if we can start at the basic at routine maintenance, we can more readily and better use our major maintenance. And that means fewer our facilities will last longer and fewer needs for capital construction prematurely for the life cycle of a building. So I'm trying to kind of start from the basement floor and work all the way through this over the next couple of years with some of the initiatives that we're looking at. Again, I've had good feedback already from the community colleges and some of those folks. They're very, very interested in starting this back up. And I think in conjunction with that, and I see Dan Celeroli sitting back here, and I told him I was going to name drop on him, but he's been very good to work with in trying to reestablish that facility managers group and try and get that up and running, because I know it was valuable for this committee to hear from those folks coming, certainly the commission meeting. And for me, I already have 4 or 5 tasks that I want to have them help me work on in the future. Then in accordance with Wyoming Statute 2115-114 AIX through 2115-115, we're required to update our facility adequacy standards. Talked about that again this morning. That's every 4 years. We'll be rolling that out a little bit later this year, and then probably finishing up about mid-summer or so next year. That will entail rules and regulations that will come before the committee. My plan is to have at least 3 meetings with the districts on that prior to go to the rulemaking, where you're required to have comment and feedback. So my hope would be that we don't see a lot of comment and feedback, because we've kind of worked through those with the districts. And again, that's one of those functions in working with this that I'd really like to stand up the facility managers group and have them help us work through that. Next page, Mr. Chairman, 3 of 101, long-term goals. I believe you've been briefed on this at the previous meeting, but currently working with the Joint Appropriations Committee to produce a 20-year strategic facility management plan. Again, this is in conjunction with UW, the community colleges. They've agreed to work with us on that. It was for state buildings, school buildings. JAC has asked that we also work with Game and Fish and the WYDOT and other entities that have state buildings to see about their how we can engage them into this process. And I've met a couple of times now with WYDOT. They're very interested in it. It, I guess, goes along with what they're trying to achieve with WYDOT and their buildings at this point in time. And again, that's looking at this routine maintenance and the major maintenance and scheduling. How can we reduce those costs? But for me, it's also, are we properly funding both those programs? I can tell you on the state side, I don't believe we are. And we all have different definitions, I think, to some degree. And there is a bill in joint appropriations to try to give commonality of definition of routine maintenance and major maintenance moving forward right now. I think it's House Bill 64. And so I think with House Bill 64 strategic plan, one of the things that a consultant testified at the last Joint Appropriations Committee on, for example, on routine maintenance, you can have proper funding, but if you don't have proper personnel or training, that doesn't get you where you need to be. And you can have all the people you want and have them properly trained, but if you don't have the funding, that doesn't get you where you need to be. So my focus really on the 20-year strategic plan is for the state to look at, are we providing the right resources for both routine and major maintenance? And I'm talking the dollar side. And then what does that look like for personnel, both within the block grant, within the state side funding? And then how do we keep those personnel trained? Because we all realize, we all see what's going on with the baby boomers retiring out, the loss of personnel in that area. And we're also working with the community colleges and the schools and the contractors association to try and implement through this process, what's the correct funding level for capital construction in the future, rather than go through some of these bust boom cycles in the years, maybe when the state's doing better, instead of rolling out a $700 million program for that biennium, which we've all experienced. Maybe it's a $400 million program and we take 300 million and we put it somewhere that we can rely upon that when the years we don't have any money, so that we can try and stabilize our own industry, grow our own industry, and then utilize our high school and college programs to help us develop the tradesmen that we need instead of people coming in from outside. 80% of the dollars the state spends goes outside. When our program dives, our workers leave the state instead of staying here. And there's lots of examples of just in the 2015, 16 timeframe when we had in-state companies that could, for example, do the masonry work on the Campbell High School or the Rock Springs High School. There's nobody in the state can do that anymore. They left because we didn't have a building program stabilized. Lots of examples. I could spend a lot of time on it. I won't do that. That's for joint appropriations, but certainly plan to keep all of you in that discussion.
Director, I think we've got Senator Rothfuss has got a question. Yes, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and Del, I briefly chatted with you about this at the end of the last meeting, but I think we need a vision that's longer than 20 years. And I think the level of detail as you come closer can certainly increase, but I don't know where the 20 years came from. It probably just came up with that seems like a long time. But certainly when we're looking at our school fleet, it should be on the same order of time as what our expected replacement for buildings are. So as this project goes forward, trying to make sure that we're having a sufficiently distant time frame so that we really can do the full calculation, anticipate, and model out what costs are going to look like, and then levelize those would be beneficial. Was there discussion on that 20 years? Is there a reason for the 20 years being the end of our timeline?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there has been discussion. I think once you get beyond 20 years, you're really pretty speculative. So the State Building Commission actually is requiring all state agencies to have a master plan, which is different than a strategic plan, but a building master plan. And their look on that was for 25 years. And that started a few years ago. So what I'm asking for is a 20-year strategic plan that either in the SBC rules and or statute that it needs to be reviewed every 5 years. The FCAs that we're going to do rolling out, hopefully this summer, they'll be completed. Well, I hope to have the contract on the street in the January timeframe to assess all the state buildings, similar to the Veritas study we did for the school buildings. Those studies are looking at 20 years out. So I'm trying to align the FCAs for these buildings, and some of the community colleges and some of the UW buildings, they also want to participate in that FCA. And so looking at the time frame for what we rolled out for these, if we update that every 5 years and make that a requirement so it just doesn't get lost, that's really, in my mind, keeping it going in perpetuity with, I think, information that is rational on a timeline. Additionally to that, if we do that every 5-year requirement, I believe that the FCA is required on the state side every 5 years. On the school side, it says periodically in the statutes. But if we could keep those FCAs rolling out on that 5-year cycle, so it's available to update the strategic plan, I believe that gets us where you're wanting to go, Senator.
Thank you.
Looks like he's good there. Okay, go ahead and continue, please.
Okay, thank you. So again, that's, I think, going to be a heavy lift for the state. I actually, as a consultant, participated in some of those for large organizations, but not a state. In talking with consultants, nobody's aware of a state doing that for all of their buildings. It was more for areas, say a DOT or things like that. But that's not to say it can't be done. I think it can be done. And I want to roll this out right. It may take a little bit of time to get it done, but again, I think it'll help establish a long-term view on funding, et cetera. Help us establish, for example, let's just take schools and maybe we mix it with state buildings. I don't know, but if we can roll out these condition assessments and we know around the state, for example, there's 5 or 6 or 7 roads need to be done. Can we let those all under a single contract and get a better bang for the buck? Than just going ahead and everybody doing 5 or 6 different separate contracts. And then also try and load them out around the state so we don't overload the Wyoming's contractors and say just the northwest part of the state. Can we spread those out so that we can keep, again, our workforce here rather than, and nothing against out-of-state contractors. We use them from time to time, a lot of great ones. But if you have a big giant contract like that, again, are they going to bring their people in? And they're not going to bring their people in unless they see a benefit cost-wise. And that means if you're bringing workers in from out of state, you're doing something wrong. You're driving your own inflation. So that's one of the things we want to look at. Any questions on long-term goals? And if not, I'll move into the budget itself, Mr. Chairman.
I think we're all good there. I appreciate the information, what you guys have there. The short-term and the long-term goals kind of gives us a roadmap of what you guys are doing. And I think anybody who has been on this committee for more than 2 years, and especially for staff that's dealt with this over the past couple of years too, it takes a long time to right a ship. And you guys have done a phenomenal job in putting the ship back on track. So appreciate you guys not only getting the track, the ship back on track, but actually charting the new waters too. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just real quickly, the Joint Appropriations Committee, I've been a little out of pocket this summer, and where do we stand on their efforts? I thought you mentioned that they have already forwarded a House bill that's made its way, and we can expect in the next session on the strategic planning effort, or where do we stand from that other committee?
Yeah, Mr.
Please.
Chairman, I'm guessing that the next JAC meeting, there'll be some direction as far as perhaps a bill or funding to get this started. What I was referring to was, I think it was House Bill 75 last year that Representative Larson brought forward, and it is different this time. So 64 is the new bill. Joint Appropriations, I think, is excited from individual conversations and where we're at in dealing with this. We've had 2 meetings with them where they've spent quite a bit of time, and I appreciate that, talking about the strategic plan within Joint Appropriations. So much so that I'm a little worried that what I'm getting the feel is they want to see it done right away and they want the answers yesterday. But I want to roll it out, make sure it's done right, and that we take our time to make sure we do it right. So that's kind of where we're at. I think there'll be something come out of Joint Appropriations along that line. Yes, strategic plan.
Thank you.
And I think, again, I going to keep hammering this out for the next few meetings as we're starting to move through, but there's going to be a lot of education on your guys' side of things too, with the new elections coming in. The way things that we're going to see some of the old time members that have had a very good relationship and know what you're talking about. You're going to have a lot of work on your hands, re-educating new members of not only this committee, but also Joint Appropriations when that comes forward as well, the next time around. So December might be a fun month for you guys, catching new members up on what's going on.
Actually, I look forward to it because I'm excited to do this work. I think it's really going to make a difference. I'm very passionate about it. And so I'm more than happy to do that either as a group or individually. So if somebody's got questions, and that goes for the committee. If you have questions on it, reach out to me anytime that you feel, necessary. So, okay, if we move on to the budget, first item up in our traditional budget is operations, and we're not asking for any supplemental request at this point in time. The next one is engineering and technology. Again, not asking for anything at this point in time. Major maintenance. Your sheet, I believe there's an update that you've had for that. Our original request through the commission was for $2,455,395, but our request for select is at $2,887,006 $2,887,621. The reason for the difference between our commission meeting and this meeting, in working with your LSO staff, and they check all of our figures and our numbers, and it's a great working relationship with them. It was pointed out that we missed funding for one of our schools. So what happened is in Fremont 25, Ash Grove came recently to the commission, and they want to take that school offline. So we did internally because the commission approved it, and we didn't take into account that you're looking backwards 1 year on your enrollment. And so they take the school offline. We didn't account for the students that were in that school. There are students, they're going to go to other schools. And when you look back, so taking into account that total ADM, that's the additional request that you see before you in here. So any questions on that, Mr. Chairman?
Seeing none.
Okay. Charter school leases, had a robust discussion this morning, and we're not asking for any additional information there. I guess to add on to that discussion, again, Laura's been working hard with the charter schools. So we had some charter schools that are adding some square footage. We've had some charter schools since we asked for the additional funding last budget session that are adding grades to it, but we think we're okay dollar-wise when we go back and look at that at this point in time. This is something that traditionally we haven't, as a supplemental, come to this committee and ask for additional information. Laura talked about that, where we're going to go to quarterly and trying to stay up with additions, growing a number of students or whatever. And so you may see, just like we do on major maintenance, additional requests in the future, supplemental requests. Modular leases, there's no dollars being requested on modular leases. Your district component projects, there's $29,832,716 being requested there. Mr. Chairman, I believe you have elsewhere in your document, there should be a breakout of all of those projects. I believe there's 15 of them. There's 2 additional projects that what we're asking the committee to do, and this is, I think, somewhat typical in the past, that as we work down through those original 15 projects, if they're funded, when we work down through those, if we have any additional money left within that component, that then we move on to that 16th and 17th school to see if we can help fund those component projects. So if there's any questions on that, I'll be more happy to try and answer those.
Not seeing any on those either right now, Director.
Okay. Planning, we're not asking for any additional money for planning. Same with design. There is no budget request for design, but I would like to point out that we're augmenting the design for a future Campbell County High School, if the Mercer proves that out, and that is funded in our request. And the same with their Campbell 1 bus barn facility, but we're taking that money out of the $95 million that was allocated 2 years ago for those designs. So we're not asking for anything more than what was given in the past session.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
So
Senator.
if we may, how long from the time, when will the Mercer study be done for the Campbell project? High school.
That October, I believe we're shooting for.
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for. I mean, they're in the middle of the study right now, but we're hoping to have it wrapped up before the legislative session begins now. It depends. Sorry, let me clarify. Per rule, there's a 30-day grace period for districts to say whether or not they agree with the Mercer study. So when we're talking about October, we're hoping to get the preliminary final report by then. Then the district will have an opportunity to digest the information that comes out of that report and contest it to the director if they don't agree with it. If they do agree with it, then we can immediately present it to the commission and ask the commission to make a determination. If they don't, then there's another process to go through in order to end up on the final determination. But we're anticipating we should have the preliminary final report by October.
Yeah, my goal and MGT is the consultant firm that's doing that study. Our discussions with them to try and align this up is that we have that done. The district has time to digest it. We can then take it to the commission for approval. If the commission approves it, then for the next meeting, we will also update this committee on it. And you'll understand why when I get to the construction portion of this, I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Well, that's where maybe I was getting ahead of myself. So,
Yeah.
you've already got a construction budget, but we don't have a Mercer completed. And this has
Yep.
been one of the bone of contentions the last
Exactly.
couple of years in the legislature. We're funding. We already know what we're going to do, and why are we wasting our time with a Mercer study if we're just going to go build those schools, given the statutory requirements of looking at all those range of alternatives? So that's where I was kind of headed.
Yep.
You've already budgeted for construction of a new school. We don't have a Mercer study to say that's what we need yet. I've been up there, and
Right.
you can kind of look out and say, well, we kind of know where it's going. But anyway, that just wanted to raise that flag, as it has been an issue for the last year or two.
I'm very much aware of that. Yes. So if there's no questions on design, I'll go ahead and move on to the construction and we can talk a little more in detail. So there's two projects being asked for Campbell One for construction. One is for the high school itself and the other is the transportation facility. As I mentioned earlier, under design, we have the design money available for them to start on both of those projects. The transportation facility, there was actually a Mercer completed on that. So we have an idea on the total cost for that, the design fee. So, we've been working with the district to try and get in that set up. So we're ready for the contracts to go out for design to start moving forward. We do need, however, the funding for the construction, but design monies are there. For the Campbell High School, there was $9 million appropriated last year for design, but that was purely for design. And I believe actually within the annual report, there's a layout on how we determine overall costs for a project. And so that includes your soft costs, your hard costs for design, demo, asbestos abatement, your construction of the building itself, things such as audits, whether or not we use a manager for the project or not. Those are all in those lines that are to be there. The $9 million that was put in the budget before was only for the actual design of the building. So when we went back and ran that through the calculator, we needed some additional money. It's a little over $3 million that we're taking out of the $95 million to hit all those things such as demo of the building, that design for that, asbestos abatement design, some of your audit fees, commissioning fees, all those sort of things are in that other portion that we, again, are going to take out of the $95 million that's available. So the Campbell County High School itself was about $160 million request for the high school. Where that came from is there's been some previous Mercers done on the Campbell County High School, and there was a recent update in February of 2024. Within that, there was, I believe, 5 or 6 different alternatives, with the Mercer saying this is the alternative we prefer. We're currently utilizing their Mercers in conjunction with the Mercer that MGT is doing. So what I put as a placeholder for the dollars is what the preferred alternative was through the 2024 update. Now, the reason we talked with MGT and we want to roll this out in that time frame is to come back for the commission and for the select committee. If we don't need the 160, I will make you aware that we're going to look for when you move forward with your budget request, it would be less dollars. If we think we need more dollars, then we'll ask for more dollars based on what the Mercer is at that point in time. So that's the goal in running this out.
So
Yep, Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So Director, I get, I get it, and I really advocated this past year and a half or so to get going, to try to get some funding out ahead of some of this stuff. The senator makes a good point, and that is, we do have processes. The two big ones in question, Sweetwater and Campbell, have had numerous studies done through the years, so we had a pretty good idea. My question on Campbell County is, the last time I visited with the superintendent up there, there was a thought that we could stage that facility. Is that still a thought? Is that the preferred remedy that we've come up with at that building, or are we just looking at a brand new facility?
Mr. Chairman, their 2024 update in February was looking at a brand new facility, not staged construction. And part of that had to do with modular buildings. And are you going to spend, I think it was like $20 million for new modulars and to maintain them over that time for construction. Are you just going to chuck $20 million out the window? When you're done doing your remodel, the remodel probably wouldn't take care of their excess square footage. You're going to still be utilizing those big wide hallways, and they got a lot of square footage that is utilized in the end to get up and down those stairs. So in both the case of Rock Springs and in Campbell, they both have 90 to 100,000 excess square footage in their old buildings. So when you're looking at it long term, I think in the Mercer we should be factoring in what those major maintenance costs are for the next 50 years by having that additional footage. And there's good excess square footage, and I think there's probably bad excess square footage. So if we had excess square footage in a building and you had 1,000 square foot classrooms and maybe you only need 800, by the way our rules and regs are set, to me, that's probably not bad to have excess square footage in a classroom. But when you have excess square footage because you can drive a semi down and turn it around in the hallway, and then at the end of the hallways, there's all these stairways, that's probably excess square footage we probably shouldn't be paying for with routine maintenance and major maintenance in the future. So that's where they're at right now. Now, where it's going to come out, I don't know. I'm keeping my nose out of that. So it's a truly independent review because as director, if the district does not agree, then I'm kind of the arbitrator on whether I agree with the district or I agree with the folks doing the Mercer study. And then my recommendation goes to the commission based upon that review. So I'm trying to stay independent and not drive that bus. So, but I'm truly aware of the concerns on the Mercer study, and I don't want to put neither the commission nor yourselves nor Joint Appropriations Committee in that boat of not having a Mercer study available for the legislature as a whole to act on.
So one
Senator
follow-up
Hicks.
question while we're on the Mercer studies, and one of the issues that came up is the reason some of the districts were doing their own is from 2016 to 2022. We weren't doing them, but the statutory obligation is they have to be done by the state.
That's correct.
And so are we at the point now that we're past all of these? Here's our Mercer study, and we've got all of the districts back in the queue that you just don't go do your own Mercer study, that it is going to follow the process going forward.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. In fact, we've got, I think, 23 Mercers going right now, and the department has hired all those consultants. They're working with us and the districts. I mean, it's obviously they need to know from an educational background and all of that. What we have done is just not throw out in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in past Mercers that actually came before the commission. Yes, they were done by the districts, but we're making those materials available to the consultants, but they're doing their own deep dive.
Good, thank you.
Yes, follow up.
So one of the drivers of the conversation the past 18 months or so was the fact that this committee's been aware of a couple of major projects for quite some time. I mean, if we're all being honest, we all knew that we were looking at Sweetwater at some point, looking at Campbell at another point. And so I think, at least from a personal standpoint, my push was to get some funding in the queue, knowing that we have those big bumps in the road coming. By the same token, my intention was never to throw out processes and lists of priorities that we might develop, for example. So I guess, Director, the question would be, what does this do to other priorities? In other words, this is our only supplemental request. It's another big high school, and I get that piece, but are we okay on other fronts? Are there other projects that have surfaced in the last year and a half or 2 years that we don't want to overlook? Does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If I had other projects, be it component, be it design or whatever, that I think we should have done following the commission's rules and processes, you would see that before you. We haven't not put anything that's moving forward. So I believe we're in a good place right now as far as the 100 million that was provided, the money that was provided last year where there was some large dollars put towards the Rock Springs High School and also funding for here in Jackson. So that takes some of those off that you alluded to. And then Campbell is really the next big domino to fall. The legislature already provided funding for the design, and we're going through the Mercer study right now. So I think moving forward, where we're at with all these Mercers is we still have money available within that 95 million. And I hope we can take care of a number of those projects within that 95 million immediately. So there's within the 95 million, we've got 17 million for here. I think there's 41.7 million that's for an elementary school design and elementary in Laramie 1. And we're going through a big Mercer study there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Repeat that, please, because I remember in the good old days, the elementary school did cost 41 or 42 million dollars. So
yeah. So we're going through the Mercer study, and I can tell you what we're looking at is some larger schools there, student population wise, than what you've seen in the past also. And so some of that's economy of scale. It helps the district with its block grant funding to have a little bit larger schools also. I mean, they're not hugely bigger than what we had before, but if you look at Coyote Ridge, it was 30 some million, and then you throw a design fees on that. So yeah, they're going up. It was alluded to by the committee earlier this morning. It might have been yourself, where we were talking about CRV. So our CRV values, if you looked at one of the charts that was in that presentation this morning, was running $170 a square foot. We're actually seeing $500 plus figures per square foot for buildings right now. And so, so I think we're there to where when these Mercers all roll out, that if I need a request next budget session, during the budget session, we'll be in a good place. The Mercers will be done. There won't be any requests, thoughts, well, we haven't done a Mercer. They will be there. They will not be in the budget, but we'll have a lot of those flowing forward. And then we're rolling out based on the 24. There's another 5 Mercers that we're going to need to start. I want to clear some of these out before we start the next ones. And that'll be the cycle you'll see in the future. It'll be driven by commission policy on the 0.3s on condition would generate a Mercer. And then the 5-year look ahead or 8-year look ahead for your capacity calculations. If we have capacity issues right now, the trend statewide is down, not up. So I don't anticipate a lot of those in the next couple of years, but who knows where we may be with the bus boom in Wyoming. So
thank you, Director. Appreciate it.
Yes, go ahead. Somebody have a question?
I think we're good.
Okay, on page 5 of 105, you'll see demolition. That is tied with the Campbell High School and their transportation facility. That's $7,256,548. There is a caveat on the Campbell High School. We'll be back for a future request, probably in the budget cycle. And it might even be the supplemental after the next budget cycle. But this falls back to what I mentioned earlier. When you look at how we put together our total costs within that design section, there's a line item that says design for asbestos, and that's where we get the number. Now, we have a standard number we kind of throw in there, but I didn't want to use that. We have time going through the design, the construction to get you a firmed number where a consultant will go out, analyze the building, work up a design and get that cost. So when we get that number, that'll be a supplemental request in addition to the demo. I feel we got a good number for the demo of the high school and the buildings around it that make up that high school. But the asbestos part of that, we don't know, and I don't want to guess when I have time to come out and give an actual figure that has been engineered versus a standard percentage.
Senator Hicks?
Real quick, what's the standard percentage you use for the construction inflationary fund, contingency fund? Is it 10%, 15% when you?
The unanticipated is 6%.
6%.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead and continue.
That's
Yes, unanticipated.
contingency.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the 6% is what we use for unanticipated. We usually calculate 4% for inflation. And then if it's new construction, we allow for 5% on contingency unless it's a renovation. And then we bump that contingency up to 10% because there's a lot of unforeseens that are typically realized in that type of construction.
That's what I was asked on the contingency, that you just build that into the budget. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because I work on the water world and we use 10% over there with those other state agencies on construction projects.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Land Opportunity Fund, we're not asking for anything there. Unanticipated, $12,677,556. And again, that is calculated on the 6%. That takes into account our construction request and our component request. Component request and demolition. So inflationary funds. This one, you may recall, Mr. Chairman, I believe it was 2 years ago, there was inflationary fund added to a specific list of projects. And when those projects are done, that money, if there's any remaining funds, is to revert back to the school foundation fund. Right now, we're anticipating there's going to be roughly about 13 million available that would revert back. So rather than take a look at ask for inflation or something of that nature, what I'd like to do is get some verbiage put in a bill that money, rather than reverting back, can roll over to future projects. We're seeing a stabilization of inflation right now. It's running probably around that 4 to 6% range, depending on the building type. But what has still not, I guess, worked its way out of the COVID era is availability or the funding for specific materials. So when you get into the HVAC, we're seeing bids coming in sometimes 300% of what the architects and engineers asked for. The electrical components on projects, the lead times on some of those are 400-500 working days to get like transformers and stuff. One of the component projects that was funded last year, and a request in here, I believe it's number 1 on the component list, is for Pinedale, and they're redoing how they feed the school with their electrical grid. And right now it's actually run and and done by the district. Once that's done, the utility has agreed to take that on in the future. But the lead time for some of the materials is 405 days, and it's very expensive. And in the school I just visited, Ten Sleep, we lucked out there in that the contractor anticipated we would award the bid, and he actually went out and bought some materials with HVAC and some of that he said, had he waited until that got into that sequence for the project to get that, he said it would probably be another 18 months to finish that school up. So we're seeing some of these issues still cropping up. And what I'd like to be able to do is utilize that fund to help with some of those costs that we really just don't, when we go out and do a cost estimate, it may be that, it may not be.
So Dell, I think one of the big issues that we have seen, I don't know how to say this because it's not, I'll just say it this way. One of the biggest issues that we've been challenged with over the past few years is transparency and hiding buckets of money. And so I'm a little concerned with this particular idea. And the reason being is those particular projects that we have outlined, those were identified and that funding was requested for. So when we go in and we say, okay, well, we'll roll this over, there's that lack of oversight from that point forward to us as a body of, well, we trust you, but do the other members of the body trust you? And when you're talking $13 to $15 million, that's a lot of money. And I see that almost as a slush fund that can be attacked, right? That we're giving you guys a lot of authority there. And so I'll be honest with you, I think that's one of the ones that although I trust you, I see the writing on the wall from what's just been coming the past 4 years. I think that's going to be one of those areas that we probably are not going to add that in there. And I think what we're going to do, at least unless the committee decides differently, is I think we need to go back and just have it be. If you guys see that, you guys are going to have to come back to us. You're going to have to let us know that those projects have unanticipated, costs associated with them, and that we have to have that. And I just think that comes down to a transparency issue of, at $13 million, I trust you, but knowing where we're headed it's going to be a very difficult process for us to keep $13 million sitting in a budget for what I would say is what I won't call it, some would call a slush fund. Senator Office, I see you, but I'm going to let the director respond, and then I'll come to you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of that. This is I think, going to be my 22nd year of testifying before the legislature. And so I've been there and done that. I would say that the only problem with that is that's really when we're bidding that project is when we know it. And to be able to come back timing wise to the legislature, it's one of those, you can pay me a little bit now, or you can pay me a whole lot later. If we needed an extra $1 million or something to complete that project, because we're not going to award it if we don't have the money. If we need that money, then I can guarantee at 4% inflation on $160 million high school, that's your 13 million on that one shot, just on inflation. I am more than happy because we're actually documenting this on that inflationary fund on projects, to do a case-by-case reporting on every dollar that's spent with an explanation of where it went and why. And come back to this committee or the Joint Appropriations Committee to talk about it at each year. I could, every one of your meetings, we could give you an update on whether we're spending it or not. More than happy to do that. My hope is we don't have to spend any of it. But if it comes up, like I say, when you look at particularly Rock Springs and this other one, the big dollars there, the commission doesn't have anything that they can react to on that. And it might be within the 6% fund, there's the availability to use some of that. But if you do that, then if something happens on the next job, there's nothing there for that. I mean, you use it up on one project. That's kind of the dilemma that I'm in. And so my thought was, this is money that the legislature has already appropriated. I'm not asking for more money. I'm just asking to be able to utilize whatever is left that they thought would probably or could be appropriated in the past to be able to use that on these projects moving forward. And if you need some kind of reporting mechanism to keep transparency, I'll go to the nth degree to provide you what you think you need.
Senator Rothfuss and then Senator Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to suggest that when we write the budget language, we can be a little more explicit about it rather than just going with a leave it in place. We could basically say of the reversion appropriation, up to this amount shall be appropriated to contingency, so that it addresses, Mr. Chairman, your concerns about making it very clear to the legislature how it's being used, but ensure that the funds are available. And then also ensure that through our budget action that that portion is effective immediately. I think we can accomplish both objectives, make sure that it's transparent, but ensure that we have access to it at all times. I guess I'd explore that. Is that something that's been considered, Mr. McComey?
Mr. Chairman, that would certainly work for me. I'm just looking for a way to not delay the projects that results in an inflationary bite bigger than probably what we'd be looking for. So,
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, the other way I think you could do this is just rather than roll that in and say in addition, just roll it into your existing contingency funds, your 6%. So that 12 millions does the exact same thing. We're just not coloring it and calling it inflationary funds. But it's still in your budget, and you have that discretionary ability the commission does to go ahead when you have those. So that's the other alternative that we could look at. To me, that's the most simple method, is just roll that into your existing contingency. And then next year, when we go through the full budget process, if you don't spend it, your contingency funds are still within your normal range, and we don't have to do any additional, but those funds are available.
yeah.
And so rather than having an inflation account and then a contingency account, you just got a contingency account.
That
Mr.
might be a
Chairman,
way for us to look at doing. Yes, Senator Rothfuss, please.
it was my understanding that that was insufficient and that it needed to be above the 6%. And I may have missed it, so I might have misunderstood the discussion. But
I think what he is.
say that
I
I'm
think
sorry.
what Senator Hicks is in, I think what Senator Hicks is saying is maybe increase that 6%. So we'll roll this 12 million that's in there, or 13 million that's in there, roll that into it on top of the 6%.
Yeah.
And you double the size of it. So it becomes a little bit better of bigger pocket of money, right? That they can dip into if they need to. But what I do worry about also is looking back at the understanding, somebody goes back and digs into this and they go inflationary adjustments for COVID. That was 4 years ago. Why are we still talking about inflationary adjustments for COVID? So I actually think what Senator Hicks is proposing is an idea that we might want to take on.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'd have concern based on
Yes.
your original concerns that we would be increasing the size of the contingency fund in a way that would draw concern from other legislators, where if we just leave the 6% contingency where it's always been at 6%, and then through the appropriation process, make it clear that there is a reason to have these other funds and that they will be utilized. So in other words, a different appropriation that can be justified and it can have an effective immediately date without changing the 6% contingency from 6%. So I guess I'd be concerned that it would be ill met. I would support it either way. I personally don't have a concern, but based on your original concern for transparency, it seems that it would be better accepted if it were just clear through the appropriation process what the other 13 million funds were intended to be used for.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we might have a discussion on. I don't want to beat this dead horse today, because I think what we'll end up doing is we'll direct staff to draft a bill for us to consider at our next meeting to move this forward. And I think that's where we'll have the discussion at a deeper level. But I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of some of the things that I've actually already heard as we've marched through this process. So it's more of a, let's try to head this steer off before it gets to the water and drowns. So That's kind of where I was going with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I anticipated actually this conversation, and I was hoping for some guidance on what might work best to move it through. You understand what my request is and why.
Yep.
It's, can we make it work somehow? So.
Yeah. Okay, appreciate
Thank
that. Let's go ahead and continue on.
Okay, next is tab 2. I'm going to turn that over to Laura.
Mr. Chairman, tab 2 is our financials. And just as a reminder, this is our financials as of June 30th, which was the end of the fiscal year for which this annual report was prepared. So the very first page on there is page 6 of 101. This is just an executive summary, which combines all of our operations, major maintenance, and capital construction together. And then we break out each of those sections in the following pages. I'll draw your attention to column C there, noting that the legislature has appropriated almost $4.2 billion over the course of the last 20 years or so towards schools, which I think is pretty remarkable.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 6 of 101.
Tab
101?
Tab 2.
What page of 101?
Page 6.
6.
Thank you.
Make sure everyone's caught up with me before I go along. We're good. The next page is page 7. This just breaks out each of those components separately. So this one is our operations appropriation summary report, just reporting our operations. Page 8 is the major maintenance appropriation summary report. And here I would draw your attention to column E. And the second number up from the bottom, not the bolded number, but the 70.8 million that's just above that. I just want to make sure that you're aware that this was as of June 30th. And so that is a one-year figure because the districts have until July 31st to report that second year to us. So that's a one-year figure on that major maintenance. And then moving along to page 9, that is the capital construction appropriation summary report on that page. Then we move along to the capital construction transaction summary. And I draw your attention to column B here. What this report really is it's a tracker for the commission that we report to every month. So you can see when we took money from the budgeted amount portion and we move it on up into the awarded. We've actually got a contract that we awarded and it tracks all of those. So as we're projects in this report in particular, that 7.9 million figure, about 87% of that went to one project, which was the Douglas Middle School HVAC replacement. And so that's how the commission tracks that. We report that to them. There are details later in the report for the transactions going in and out that I will point out to you as we go along. The next page is page 11, and this is a detailing of the unanticipated accounts. Like we were just discussing the unanticipated accounts. We get those for a specific biennium, and only the projects that were appropriated during that biennium can tap into those specific unanticipated accounts. And when all of the projects are to the point where no one else is going to be tapping into those, we revert those. And there are several that we have reverted in the last year or so. So I have 3 unanticipated accounts that are remaining currently. This one is for 17-18. And this has a balance of just under $1.2 million. Moving along to page 12, this is another of our unanticipated reports. This is for the 21-22 biennium, and we have about $1 million even in there. And then as we move along, pages 13 and 14 are the details of the transaction reports, the ones that are going in. So this is just the detailed counting. You'll see the third line down. That was the middle school HVAC that I was talking about earlier. That's where it was being awarded to. And that runs through page 14. Then on page 15, this is the 23-24 unanticipated account with a balance of just over 2.9 million in it. And then we move into pages 16 and 17, and this is the reverse. This is the transfer out where you see the negative that matches where we took it out of the budget and we moved it into the awarded column. Then as we move along, you'll see pages 18 through 31 is a very large report. That is a listing of all of the appropriations by district and facility. And we produce that every month as well for the commission. And we also send this over to your LSO staff.
Committee, just briefly, and then also Laura, I'll touch base here really quick. This is where about 95% of your questions for your school district come from, at least in my understanding is what's coming up, what's been, at least for your constituents, how things are being built. So this is a really good report to look into. And if you want this, Ashley gets this, I think it's Ashley, right? You get this. Oh,
Matt.
okay. So any one of the four over there, if you contact them, they can get it for you, but this is really good information. And then Laura, you're doing great at the speed. I would say stick at 30,000 foot level for
Got
it.
it.
Like I said, my anticipation is that everybody in this committee has read through this material and
Great. The less I
That-
have to say, the happier I am. So we'll move along then to the page 32, which is the major maintenance report, also known as the 680 report. This is the one where the districts have through July 31st to report their expenditures. There are a couple districts on here that you'll see have a $0 amount. Much better than last year. We had probably 10 or 12 of them at this point in the year, and we worked really hard this last year. I have a staff member, her name is Laura Still, that corrals this. She did educational videos. She will even do things like, if you are stuck, send your bank statements to her and she will sit and help you reconcile it. That's the detail that in the customer service that she provides to these districts. But we do have a couple. Obviously, we have turnover in the districts, and that's the case with these. We've had turnover. They either weren't aware, or there's one where we actually have all the information we need except the expenditures. We had someone new took over July 1st in that district, and they can't find any of the records. So at this point, what we said was, you know what? She's trying to get a handle on a brand new job and everything. What we finally just said, this is a special case. Go ahead and we'll put a 0 in for this year. We'll work with you through the course of the year. I was just talking to Laura yesterday, and she found some invoices. So they're trying to find the information. As they get that information next year, you'll probably see a larger amount for that district, because we'll just allow it to go to next year. Just, we work with them as best we can. And the other two districts we'll continue to work with. And as we get that information and when it's finalized, we'll provide you an updated copy of that report. Moving along to page 33, there are two items here. One is the B11 report. So if we move money, statutorily, we're allowed to move up to 15% of a project between phases. And if we were to do that, if we would report it here, we didn't have anything in this last fiscal year. Then the emergency report is right below that. We did have one access to the emergency funds that the School Facilities Commission approved that authorized funds to install a water treatment program at the Claremont K-12 in Sheridan 3, and that was just a little over $34,000. Moving along then to page 34, another requirement of the annual report and something that we keep in our robust database of buildings during the year is any closed, demolished, or disposed buildings. You'll see here there were 3 closed, 2 demolished, and 5 disposed buildings, which Director McComey was referencing earlier. Moving along then to page 35, this is also a requirement to do new schools that are opened. And this year we also wanted to include, we had 2 large additions that opened. And so we went ahead and included those on this report as well so that you could see those additions.
Mr. Chairman.
please.
Laura, I hate to slow you down. I apologize, but I have to know what a teacherage is.
A teacherage is something that the school districts may keep in order to house a teacher. It's a home for a teacher that they provide housing so that they can have teachers come up, because sometimes they can't find housing or they have nowhere else to live.
I didn't know we had one.
Just quickly, we've got more than one.
Yes.
Gillian, how many are you guys building here right now?
24 apartments just directly behind.
And those are all your local dollars. None of those have been funded through the state. Is that correct? And for those of you who couldn't hear online, there's 24 apartment complex coming in directly behind my back here in the window. And all of that was funded through local 1% sales tax. So-
Mr. Chairman, my question was related to a demolished building over in Riverton, it looks like, and
Yep.
Thank you for letting me ask that. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. And don't feel bad. When I first started with this agency, I had never heard the word teacherage before. I thought it was a made up word. So don't feel bad.
Yeah.
We'll move along then to tab 3, which starts on page 36 of 101. This is our enrollment figures. And we did something just a little bit different for you this year, particularly because charter schools have kind of exploded and we anticipate them getting bigger. We went ahead and did the graphs that we normally do for you. We did them both excluding the charter schools and then including the charter schools so that you can see the difference. And this first graph here is the statewide brick and mortar enrollment. which excludes the charter schools. The only charter school that's an exception to that is the Arapahoe High School in Fremont 38, because that is the only high school in that district. And so we include it in here because otherwise we wouldn't have those high school kids in there, if that makes sense. You'll see a big dip, obviously, in 2020 with COVID, and we started to come back up, and now we're dipping again. The next page is page 37, and this is just the detail of all the figures by district, where you can see that enrollment from 2014 clear through 2023 by district. So if there's any questions as to where the information from the graph came from, that's where it is. And then something else we included this year is starting on page 38 through 42. We went ahead and just it's a graphic representation of the enrollments by region and district. This is also excluding the charter schools, just so you can kind of get it. Different regions have different issues going on. And so that way you can kind of see what's going on and do a comparison by region. Not seeing any questions, so I'll move along. Then we move along to page 43. And this is where this is charter schools only. That's the only thing that's in there, excluding the high school in Fremont 38. So you can see that the enrollment for charter schools is going up, and we had kind of a sharp incline there from 22 to 23. And the next page after that, which is page 44, that's just the detail of those figures that you see in graphed. Then as we move on to page 45, this is the brick and mortar enrollment along with the charter school. So we have everything combined in one graph here. And you'll see quite a bit of differences, like decreases and then some increases and then down again. For the 23 figure, the state actually went down, the state enrollment went down about 1,700 students, but the charters went up about 331 for a net loss of about 1,400 students there. So just to show you how that when you combine the data, what you get. And again, we put all the details of that on page 46 so that you can look by district if you so choose. And then we did the same thing again. We did pages 47 through 57. This is the enrollment by region and district with the charter schools included. And Mr. Chairman, that includes concludes enrollment section, unless you have questions for me.
Committee, any questions on enrollment? I think this is all pretty straightforward stuff. This is actually, again, one of those that's really good information and provides a good level of detail as to why we're making the decisions that we're making, especially in the areas of the state that we're making them.
Correct. And the next section is capacity and condition. And John and I are probably going to tag team that one a little bit, but I'm going to start off with Mr. Rexis.
Certainly. And again, we'll just stay at that 30,000 foot level. No need to get into the nitty gritty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, I'm John Rexis, Project Management Supervisor for State Construction. I'm going to tackle the condition portion of this section, and I'll do it as quick as I can. As you know, the condition schedule categorizes educational and non-educational buildings, and that allows us to prioritize those buildings on a list for you, which is attached. The latest facility condition assessment that was performed in 23 that generated last year's list. We also used that same information for this year's. However, per the methodology, we are calculating 5 years in advance. So we added another year's worth of deficiencies in, and that's what drove some of the changes on the prioritized list. We did, I would like to add to that when we've got an appropriated remedy or an actual project that's complete, we're going in and we're deducting those deficiencies out. So that's causing some of those changes too in real time. Even though the project isn't necessarily finished yet, we know that we're addressing it and we're going to correct the issues that are at hand. The new prioritized list for condition follows right after the introduction sheet, and we'll work through that before I turn it over to Laura to do her portion of the capacity introduction. But I would like to point out that based on the addition of another year's deficiencies, we've identified 5 new Mercer studies that need to be completed, as mentioned by Director McComey earlier. So we're going to let some of these others move along a little bit before we put those out, but we will be working on them probably shortly after the new year.
And I'll just, committee, just briefly, if you look at the very last page, 61, this is a good example of this living document, living, breathing document. Page 61, if you go up, number 383 is on the list, and that's Dildine Elementary. That just happens to be an elementary school in my district that just went through a massive, massive renovation over the course of the last year and just reopened up this year. And actually, I think we have a former principal, if I remember right. So it is that is the living, breathing document here that you see that was actually way up the list in the low double digits, if I remember right. And after going through that major renovation, going through that process, it is now down at that 383 because the kids are back in there starting Monday. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to note that on the prioritized list, we did mark which schools were currently undergoing a Mercer. I would like to point out that there needs to be a correction on this. We now currently have 25 Mercers in play, and that isn't necessarily because of condition. We did add a couple of Mercers based on Chapter 3, Section 8 adequacy.
perfect. Thank
And
you.
with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Laura again for the.
John, just a second. We've got a question here.
Okay.
John, just a quick question regarding all these Mercer studies. What's the shelf life on those? When you say we've got over 20 of them out there, I just wonder, are a bunch of them going to end up on the shelf, knowing that we can't approve 24 projects at a time?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's something that we're going to take a look at in regards to how we're letting the projects to make sure that we've got the available resources to take care of that. So we want to time it appropriately, depending on the scope and size of the project and the location of the project. We'll probably make considerations so that we're not overloading any one particular market. But I believe that a majority of the schools that are currently undergoing a Mercer study already have an appropriation available to them. There are some, however, that you may see in the next biennial budget, depending on what the determination is from that Mercer study.
Okay.
A lot of these were driven from that 95 million to start out with, and then a couple of these others were also that Chapter 3, Section 8 too. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's
Thank
correct,
you, Joe.
Mr. Chairman. One other thing that we'd like to note is there may not be the generation of a project through the Mercer either. In some cases, it may say use your major maintenance funds or use a major component project fund rather than a larger reconstruction on some of those projects. And some of them may come back and say, do nothing.
Perfect. Thank you. Laura, I think it's over to you.
Great, thank you. So the capacity section starts on page 68, and I'll just do, as you said, a 30,000-foot view. The SFC is responsible for assessing the adequacy of the buildings in relation to the number of students that occupy the space. And in the following pages, there's a lot more detail if you're interested in how that calculation, that methodology works. But one of the main things that we use, since the number of students is always in flux, is we use that October 1st enrollment that we receive from WDE, and we use that in two ways: to calculate the capacity and also to populate the enrollment projections, which helps assist us in things that may need a remedy or identifying those that have a capacity issue. The capacity methodology was adopted, I believe, in 2012, but it's been refined over the years. And if you're curious as to all the things that, the restricted the capacity, the utilization rates, the configuration, alternative schools, all of that information that Director McComey touched on earlier, I don't think you want me to go into the details on those. That's listed on pages 70 to 74, if anyone is interested in those. And then if we move on to page 75, this is where we get into our first capacity by district report. And this just lists that capacity because we look at it as an overall district, and the district with the highest percentage of capacity is listed at the top and then followed by the other 47 in ranking order based on that third column, which is the percent capacity. And then if we move along to the next page, this is where we start looking at the capacity by individual school. On page 76, you'll see two boxes at the top. The first box, which has about 6 schools in it, these are the ones that are considered high capacity needs. They're over 100% capacity. And so those are identified. You'll see the ones that have the asterisk next to them have already been identified for Mercer studies, and Mercer studies are underway. The remaining two, this was just report was just generated for this year. We just weren't generated those. So those last two, we haven't looked at a remedy for those yet.
So those are self-identified by the department, correct? To start looking at potential remedies, is that right?
No, this is based strictly on their capacity,
Just
and then
capacity.
we would have to approach the district and the
Okay.
school and say, what's the game plan here? And that's when John and his crew get involved with trying to work with them and their project managers to find out what we need to identify for a remedy or a Mercer study, or maybe they just say, yeah, this was a fluke. We know we've got a bubble. We're fine.
Okay,
So
perfect.
it
Thank
may
you.
be nothing. That's why I just wanted to identify the ones, most of the ones on the top of the list are already been identified for a Mercer study so that you know that we're on top of that.
Awesome.
The next box down are the medium capacity schools, and those are considered from 90 to like 99%. So those are ones that we're keeping an eye on because they may need something in the future, but they may not. It may go back down, it may be a bubble in enrollment, and we may see something drop. But those are ones to keep an eye out for. And then the rest of them are all just schools that are rated, they're under the 90% mark, and they just keep going down through the remainder of the report, which I believe ends on this tab on page 83. So if there's no questions on that, that would conclude capacity.
I just had one, and it was the double asterisk that was in here, and it's number 301. And it's the modular. So,
That's for a school that'll be closed during the 24-25 school year.
and are they planning on reopening in 25? I guess that was my question is, the note says it's closed for this
24.
school year. I just didn't know what the,
I honestly don't know what the plan is for the following year. John, do you know on that one?
Mr. Chairman, Notch Peak is kind of a temporary arrangement, I believe, to hold the students until Antelope Creek is finished.
Okay.
So as soon as that school gets completed and the students move over.
so somewhat of a swing space, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That was my only question on that. So,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as you go down through this list, although it's under capacity, you'll see some additional asterisks there. Those for the Mercer studies, we just noted those, some of those, the majority of those are actually based on condition, not capacity down below. So those ones that fall outside of this 100% and between 90 and 100, a lot of those ones down below are undergoing a Mercer, but it's due to either 3-8 or condition.
Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Mr. Rixis to start on the project cost budgeting section.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to run through this fairly quickly and then open it up for questions, but I do want to spend just a couple of minutes on our project budget worksheet, if you will. This is basically a step-by-step process for how we calculate our project cost budgeting. The first step is calculate, and please stop me if you feel like I'm moving along too fast.
are you going through page 89?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually 84.
84. Okay, so you're not going to the actual worksheet itself.
I would rather work through the narrative first and then get to that.
Okay.
I think it'll make a little more sense to everybody.
Okay.
So our first step is to calculate the allowable square footage. You know that we have our square footage calculator for that we've used for some time. After that, we establish the projected direct construction cost per square foot for that size of that building. And then we start taking a look at a lot of the incidentals, like, is there a need for some planning? Do we have to purchase property? And then we start working our way into design and both soft costs and hard costs, and then the construction costs. I'm going to skip over page 85, because I assume most of you have read that. Then we've got the Wyoming School Facilities Appropriation Sequence, which I'm sure you're all very much aware of, followed by the School Facilities Appropriation Flow Chart. And then we get to page 89, which is a bit of an eye test. And this is our capital budget worksheet that we do for every project that runs through. As you can see, we used an example elementary school in the southeast quarter of the state. The reason why we categorize those regions is because we actually have different costs for different regions in the state. The square footage calculator sets the square footage after the design capacity has been established based on projected enrollments. That's something that we're going to be taking a look at. And it also establishes when we anticipate the bid letting to occur so that we can make the adjustments as necessary for inflation. And probably the most important piece of all this is it's down in the green box on the construction line, and it's about a third of the way down in that box. And you'll see line 4.3.3.A, which is the new construction line, and that establishes and takes the square footage and the square footage cost to create the anticipated hard bid budget for the project. Then down below that, there's considerations for furnitures, fixtures, and equipment and other considerations. So if we've got a project, say, that's remote, that needs other considerations for infrastructure or that type of thing, that's where we typically make modifications or adjustments to that based on the type of construction. We also plug in the appropriate contingency amount, and that drives a total cost for construction. That total cost for construction populates by percentage a lot of the soft costs and the anticipated design costs. And that's the yellow box that's above that. And as you can see, this is a general budget worksheet that covers typical costs and services. There's always a lot of thought and consideration given to the project for things that might pop up. Say, if there's not enough water pressure and we may need a cistern in order to make the fire system work, and so on and so forth. But that pretty much sums up how we derive our project costs. I wish that it went as fast as I just explained it to you, but with that, I'll go ahead and open up for any questions before I get into some of the graphics that are available after that.
Committee, any questions? Specifically, anybody in the people that are new here? Doesn't look like it, so.
Okay, what we have next is essentially different variations of similar information, right? Which is essentially the hard construction cost per square foot and the historical data that we have plotted out on a graph. The first page is just a typical line graph. You can see those costs of construction. Following that, we've got a scatter chart that kind of shows by year where our costs have been. The blue dots represent the bid amounts per square foot. The orange amounts represent the average. And of course, you can see the trend line going through the middle of that. Then that's followed by a graph of the hard construction cost per square foot versus the actual construction costs. So we take the original bid amount and we figure out what the square foot construction cost is, and then any change orders or other expenses that are incurred during the course of construction. You'll notice that at the end of that graph, we drop off at 2020. The reason for that is that we've got some projects that just haven't quite been completely closed out. So we may not be accurate if we start projecting what those final costs are. And then right behind that is the same information just represented on a bar chart that may be a little bit easier to read depending on what your preference is.
Okay.
And that concludes all of tab 5. So are there any questions in regards to those charts?
Seeing none, guess we're moving on to tab 6.
Okay. Tab 6 is our deployment schedule. This has been around for several years. I want to say 8 or 9 years. And I want to say that it's a straight line disbursement based on anticipated durations by phase. So we take a look at a project and we determine when we think the design is going to begin, how long the design phase is going to last, and then how long the construction phase will last after that. And then whatever the amount of months there are within that schedule, we divide the available funds by that duration. And then that drops down to the bottom of the chart. And that shows you by quarter what our anticipated expenditures are going to be for that particular quarter. I would note that anything on here that you see highlighted in orange is what we anticipated coming out of the 100 million that was received in the 23 general session. Anything that's in that kind of light pinkish color are projects that are funded through the 25-26 biennium and the 24 budget session. And these are only projects that have unspent funds on there. You can see that there's quite a few projects that only have one column for this particular quarter. A lot of those projects are getting ready to close out, and some of them may even be getting pretty close to reverting funds on. However, some of them may need to still go through that 11-month warranty period before we close them out and revert those funds. Any questions on the deployment schedule?
No, I think that's really good information again as well. There's nothing in this report that's not good, really. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Director McComey for the supplemental budget considerations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we talked about the budget earlier today in the executive opening remarks. This particular section on the front end, you should have in there is the 25-26 supplemental CapCon requests. Again, we mentioned that earlier, that was in your report, so you can see the actual projects that we're looking at for components, as well as the total dollar amounts, where I just in our previous discussion highlighted the 29 million and change for those component requests. And other than that, I think we went down through everything. The Campbell High School was the $160 million that I mentioned, the 13,531,000 for the transportation facility. So that's how we arrived at the 174,000. And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but that's on page 100 of 101, where I'm at now. The demo, again, we have a note there that does not include the asbestos abatement. I think that was line 13 in that chart that John went over, in how we calculate the cost of a project under the design section. That will be forwarding and request in the future should that project move forward. And then our anticipated, and then the total at $226,425 and 547. So, Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions, more than happy to go back through the budget again, but I think we've kind of discussed that.
okay, committee, any discussion and or questions regarding the actual supplemental budget request from the department and through the commission? Nothing. Okay. Appreciate you guys breezing through that very quickly. Again, I think the committee has gone through this and at least looked at the pieces that are important to them and have studied that. So committee, this brings us to the next topic of discussion at this point is we'll open it up for public comment first, but then that'll allow us to decide how we want to move forward with this. I'll have my recommendation to the committee, but we'll do that afterwards. So any public comment on the supplemental request? Seeing none. Thanks for making the trip up here from Rock Springs, by the way. I see we've got some Rock Springs trustees and well, you're not a trustee, but you're in our heart, so. All right. Seeing no public comment, committee, that will bring the bill back up here to the dais. And typically speaking, there's two ways of handling this. The first one of which is my recommendation is we draft a bill and we have a bill put forward for consideration as is listed in this document here and incorporates all this information. And then there will also be a memo that goes along with that, that goes to not only JAC, but to the governor's office recommending this. I would also like to make sure that we include leadership on that. That's something that is outside of the norm, but knowing that we're going to have a transition in the next few months, I'd like to include any and all leadership personnel on this for both houses, please. Committee, any discussions beyond that, or I can make that a chairman's directive to just have that drafted, absent objection. I guess that's what we'll do. Okay, so Seeing nobody object to that, that's what we'll do. So we'll have them both drafted, the memo as well as the bill. Is there any changes up front that anybody would like to address before we have the bill drafted and we make major changes to the bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I
Senator.
appreciate your directive and I think it's appropriate. We'll have plenty of time in October to wrestle with some issues that exist there. And just as kind of a prelude to that, I'm going to throw out there that we don't know how many whitecaps are going to be on the water going forward, but there are going to be some. There's no question in my mind. For example, we fought through this last session a pretty important project down in the southwest part of the state. It was bloody and it was difficult, and it was disappointing to me that that we had a member of this committee, for example, not even voting to keep that in the budget. And we had representatives from a part of the world where that project would end up that actually did not support the project. We probably will run into that on the big project that's in this bill coming up in October. And I'm just preparing the committee for that because, quite frankly, several folks in that part of the world campaigned on the issue of reducing public school funding. And that's who was elected. So I guess that I'll be thinking a lot about that. And I don't know where we're going to go in October. I know what the appropriate thing is to do and what I've always done, which is to support what I know is right and what this committee should do, Mr. Chairman, but I don't know. I don't know what we're going to walk into in the coming months. Having listened and watched throughout the state, how many folks campaigned on the issue of reducing all of these costs, we'll just have to see. But that's enough for today, Mr. Chairman, and I support the bill draft and we'll take it up again in October.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chairman just opened up and basically echoed my exact sentiments. The two of us are responsible for defending our bills as they move forward to the House and the Senate, and how they go forward. And as I had this discussion earlier with Senator Hicks as well, it's tough when there's a lack of education on how these projects develop, how these projects move. And then I can actually just tell you a personal story here from my campaign that just ended, that, I was excited that we built $90 million worth of, or put $90 million worth of schools in the budget for Laramie County that has been severely neglected. And I was pushed that we shouldn't be spending that much money on schools. And, with the separation of 17 votes, I'd say about 51% agreed with me and 49% did not. So it's a very, very difficult discussion for us to have. But I tend to agree with the co-chairman here that it gets difficult for us to defend these discussions on the floor when the people that live in those backyards won't even, help us defend their positions. So, Senator
Mr.
Hicks?
Chairman, I wasn't going to opine on this subject, but I've got a lot of experience in this thing as being on Select Water, and for the last 10 years, having legislators come out every year and try to cut projects or funding for the Water Development Commission. This is nothing new. I've literally had to defend the Select Water bill, which is primarily for irrigation district, and municipalities are the biggest user of the program. One of my long-term frustrations with that is continually people have got $20 or $30 million projects in there and they vote against the bill. So this is nothing new that hasn't been going on for at least my 10 years on Select Water. It's just now come to the chickens roosting in a different area of the budget. And quite frankly, it's not any different than what we've dealt with the water bills. That we've had entire committees hostile to trying to move state-funded water projects for municipalities and irrigations districts through the legislature. So anyway,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I understand where the senator's coming from, but having sat there beside him for the past 18 years or whatever it's been, 15, the water projects don't run into any kind of headwind compared to what some of these projects have been running into. And that's fine. I mean, I don't, our job is to represent as a select committee the best recommendations that we can make. We bring those forward with the help of, by the way, Chairman, thank you for sitting through all of this and being here and the work you do on the commission. We take the commission's thoughts. We certainly work with our staff and with the department. Thank goodness for you guys. Thanks for all your hard work. And then we listen to the districts and we try to sift through and take forward. And I think we've overall done a pretty darn good job. You look back and I almost wish we would have built more schools back about 10 years ago, now that we're up to $700 a square foot, John. But no, it is frustrating. And there's been a lot of pushback on this front. I think there will be more. I think that we've all heard it. For whatever reason, that's going to be a target. And so we'll just have to gauge the winds and put the sails up accordingly.
We'll have this discussion as we move forward next meeting. Staff, you have anything else for the dais?
Mr. Chairman, your next meeting is a one-day meeting on October 16th in Cheyenne. We do not have any tours scheduled for that committee meeting at this time.
Do not anticipate any meeting tours unless anybody is, itching to get into maybe the newest elementary school in the state at this point. But other than that, I do not anticipate that. We'll try to save a little bit of money and just bring everybody down for that one day. And then that's going to be the budget discussion. We'll forward that on for our November deadline, and that'll be it. So anything further? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 3:18. Thank you.
Nice job. Go ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
See you, Senator.
All right.